We're live. My guest today is Jake Hartnell. He's the founder of Juno, DAO DAO, and Stargaze. Today we're talking about Juno, DAOs, Cosmwasm. My only fear is that we have too many things to talk about in an hour. I'm very interested in Juno and its place in the interchain ecosystem as a playground for experimentation with DAOs. I also want to talk about DAO DAO, DAO politics, and building on DAOs. And of course, Cosmwasm, open source, Juno roadmap, and everything in between. So strap in because this one's going to be deep. I'm also dying to find out if he thinks Juno is dead. So before we get started, make sure to hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to get notified when I go live every week. And remember that none of what we discuss here on the Interrupt is investment advice. And if you enjoy this content, please consider staking with us. We're live on Evmos and on Quicksilver. And on the occasion of Jake being on a podcast, we set up a Juno validator. We've got some tokens there delegated. We're not in the active set, but why don't you help us get to the active set by staking with Interrupt? My guest, Jake Hartnell, is coming up next, right here on the Interrupt. Jake Hartnell, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
You're welcome. It's great. It's really early. I'm just, drinking my coffee, getting fired up. All you need to do is just say the magic word, and then I'm gonna get fired up.
Is that DAO DAO? It's
no,
DAOs.
it's just, I love talking about DAOs.
Well, before we get into all that, I looked your name up on Google and I scrolled to like pages 2 and 3 and 4. And found some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And so, so you went to Berkeley and you were focusing on like digital publishing and web annotation. Is that right?
Yeah, my thesis was on on digital publishing in particular and decentralized content publishing. And it was 2014, but I was still talking about using like cryptocurrency to I just woke up, to disintermediate like the middlemen and allow authors and content creators to sell directly to their end consumers and enable like a bunch of cool new business models. So yeah, I've been thinking about crypto.
This is really early, I guess. So I mean, what kind of crypto technologies were you looking at back then?
NFTs weren't even a concept back then. Like Ethereum wasn't even publicly announced back then. So like I was part of Bitcoin Club at Berkeley, and it was really all that we had to go with. At that time though, it was cheap enough to use Bitcoin for payments. And we were kind of exploring some really interesting ideas there around like affiliate marketing and stuff like that. Like imagine if you could like resell digital items was like one of the things that we were really interested in. Like if you bought like an ebook, for example, if you could like resell it to your friends and then like get some percentage of like a refer fee for like reselling.
Then were you guys looking at Counterparty and some of that stuff, like some of those early examples of building,
non-fungible, more theoretical and experimental. And we were looking at like a lot of like, another thing that we were just really annoyed about was how much like Amazon had captured the ebook market and how they were like screwing over like publishers and authors. Like authors still to this day pay to like 30 to 60% of their sales to like big fucking evil Amazon. And that's just still insane to me. Like it's such a bad deal for like the authors and publishers, and like these people don't make a ton of money to begin with. So, and it's ultimately just to ship a file over the internet, which is, I would actually be one of the projects that I'd be really interested to see as like, DAOs and like NFTs is like NFTs that get away from like JPEGs towards like actual like content distribution, whether it's like albums, like for music or for like ebooks or things like that. I think that there's like, those are actually really great use cases for NFTs. And I hope maybe like this year, maybe there might be some secret projects going on. You never know. I hope that there's cool like DAO focused publishing tools.
Yeah, it does seem like there's an exorbitant tax on publishing digital media, and sometimes you'll even see books on Amazon. The digital version is more expensive than the print version. And you're like, what the fuck? How is this possible? This is supposed to be the cheapest way to distribute content like ever created by man. And you don't really understand why the economics there don't work out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Did you also write a novel?
I did. I wrote a sci-fi novel. It was it's kind of like an underground kind of thing. Got a decent amount of readers.
Yeah.
And
it's got good reviews on Amazon.
I think it's ironically a lot more timely now, though I hate talking about it because I hate it.
Okay. So well, then we'll skip to the next question.
And if you go in the Google history, you can hear about it. It was ahead of its time.
And you also ran a record label, is that right?
Yeah. In undergrad, I had started an indie record label with a friend, and yeah, that was quite the experience. It kind of was one of the things that really got me into all these questions of content. It kind of actually got me into programming in a weird way too, wanting to be able to make websites for bands and stuff. And that was the start of my programming Web3 decentralized content kind of journey. But yeah,
cool. So tell me, this early work that you did on open source and open web standards around this digital publishing and digital annotation work. I think you also had a startup that was doing digital annotation. How did that inform what you're doing now, and what lessons did you learn from that sort of period of your career that informs the kind of work you're doing now, and also maybe the thing, aspects around content payment and open source remuneration and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my first this first startup I worked for, I was one of the really early employees, and we kind of just took it from 0 to 1. It was called Hypothesis, and it was a web annotation startup. It's still around today, and it's actually used by over 1 million students use Hypothesis today to annotate documents and articles, and some publishers are using it, and a lot of scientific people use it to annotate documents and have scholarly discussions. So it's pretty cool to have a startup that is not dead. Can't be said for all my startups, but that one was really important in terms of me learning how to build a product and ship it and get people using it, and being okay with imperfection. It's just taught me the importance of shipping and getting something out there, and then seeing what people wanted and building the next thing. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then through that experience, I got to learn a lot about open source kind of culture. And I was even had the privilege of being on a W3C working group which is a standards body.
Yeah. Which one?
W3C. They make a bunch of
which standards? Which group were you?
I was working on the web annotation standard. So
okay.
Which was actually finalized. It actually made it to a huge working group, but it's not been the most successful standard of all time, which happens to actually a lot of standards as well. Just because a standard is written doesn't mean it gets widely adopted. That actually kind of sort of shapes my thoughts on how standards should be developed. Sometimes committees is not the best. You just got to go out and ship things. If we wanted to make a standard for DAO tooling, we could have a big committee and get all the Cosmos Hub people together and try to agree on some standard. But it's better to just ship it, and then eventually the standard kind of emerges organically.
So you think that some standards can emerge in a more organic way by people using it and implementing it? And do you know examples of that where standards have emerged without, I mean, I'm sure there are many, but are there any that stand out to you as particularly interesting?
I think a lot of the Ethereum improvement proposals, like they, they're kind of this interesting crux between like a standard and like they didn't get together with a bunch of other blockchain people and they were like, we want to create a like standard for like NFT metadata or whatever. Or OpenSea is another great example of this. Is like we actually use like the OpenSea standard for NFT metadata, like at Stargaze and with like a bunch of like the Cosmwasm NFTs. We never got together in a group with those people to like, be like, we should all like use this thing. It kind of just became super popular. Like everyone started using the ERC 721 standard.
Yeah.
But it was never like designed in a committee. They kind of just like they did a really nice write-up about it. And then they like shipped some working implementations and then everyone just kind of naturally started using those. Like even cross ecosystem, like in Cosmwasm, we don't use the EVM, but we still use that same standard. So all the functions, the way it's designed, like behave basically exactly the same way. And we never had to have like a, sort of big committee about it. I think the same thing with like the metadata standards for NFTs. So like OpenSea, and you can read about this, just like Google like NFT OpenSea metadata standard, and you'll find it. Why reinvent the wheel? If someone like ships something and they have like an open spec for it that works, that's a great way to set a standard because like everyone, that's like integrating with these things, like it makes integration a lot easier if we use the OpenSea standard versus if we try to like make our own.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think that with this sort of thing, being early also helps, right? So like with something like the OpenSea standard, they are,
you got to be early and you got to ship something that works. And then
right.
If like a lot of people integrate with it, then it's got a lot of momentum as a standard.
Yeah. Standards is something that has momentum and where, W3C maybe helps kickstarting that momentum.
I hope we get this way with like ICS standards as well, like interchain standards, because they are moving a little bit slowly at the moment. And IBC could just move so much faster, like the kinds of standards that we could build on top of it. But there's a little bit too much central planning and not enough team shipping, which is, one of the things I hope that we're going to start doing with Juno even more is just like shipping these new interchain standards and protocols. So.
Yeah. Do you think that IBC has a chance of becoming a standard outside of like quote unquote Cosmos?
Oh, it already is.
Like ERC 20. Yeah.
If you're following like the developments of IBC, it's like the probably most popular interoperability framework. Polkadot's joining. Near has plans to join IBC. I've talked with like the Near team a lot. Avalanche is joining IBC. Like those are 3 major ecosystems. And if you add that to like everything that's like happening in Cosmos, like, wow, holy shit, that's really great momentum. And imagine all those chains join, you got Avalanche, you got Polkadot, you got all of Cosmos, you got Near, like other ecosystems are going to be like, goddamn, like we can't miss out on the whole interchain thing because it's like, it's pretty great and it's a seamless experience. And I think by the end of this year, if we have all those chains like kind of join successfully and getting some successful adoption, like I wouldn't be surprised if others like Solana or like, who knows, maybe even Polygon, like I think others will definitely consider joining. Like all these standards kind of rely on network effects, and the bigger the network grows, the more cost there is to not being in the network, more opportunity there is to join. So that'll be really exciting.
Yeah, it always felt to me like IBC was, and I think to a lot of people, in the Cosmos ecosystem, like IBC was this sort of gem, right? It's just like this gem that the Cosmos ecosystem created, and it was just waiting to proliferate outside of the interchain, or of like the IBC or like the Cosmos SDK ecosystem, and it feels like it's happening now. Like it feels like we're right at the beginning of it.
It's great.
It's super cool. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Juno a little bit. You know, I said in the beginning, you know, I wanted to ask you if you think Juno is dead. Is Juno dead? Okay.
A
Long
lot of
live
people.
Juno.
I mean, long live Juno. Yeah, it's like I think if you look on Map of Zones, they have this amazing tab in terms of, it's called daily active users. Over the past 7 days, Juno is fucking #1, my friend. We are the most used chain in the Cosmos ecosystem. In fact, our stats have been pretty good for a while. Everyone FUDs us, and yet the people like FUDding us are like way less actively used. So just gonna throw that
Who
out
FUDs
there.
you?
You know, we FUD ourselves, to be honest. Like, but I think that's one of the great things about Juno culture is that, you know what, our chain has made mistakes in the past, but at least we've like fucking dealt with them, and we're like finding ways to like move forward as a community. And that's what I really pay attention to. Because I think that there's a lot of chains out there with a lot of problems, a lot of, you know, like shady stuff happening, or, you know, I don't want to like get into like talking shit about other chains, but like, you know, it's out there. There's a lot of like inefficiencies in governance. There's a lot of just like basically lack of direction, lack of like clear direction, lack of usage even. And I think that as a community, like the Juno community has been much more honest about like dealing with all our faults and our problems, and has been more constructive like moving forward. Like if you look at like Juno sub DAOs, like they're not perfect, but they're like actually moving the needle and like doing important experiments. And frankly, like allow for a lot more accountability than anything else I've seen in the ecosystem, you know?
Yeah, it feels to me like Juno is, you know, looking at the entire ecosystem, and, you know, like I try to have a broad view of the ecosystem. Like I don't dive sort of like really deep into any one community, but from looking at it as an overview, it feels like the Juno ecosystem is kind of like on this move fast and break things sort of mentality, right? Where like, you know, there's been a lot of issues, as you mentioned, and there's been some drama, right? But I think the thing that's the most consistent is the honesty, right? Like people are honest about, and the community is honest about what it is and what it's doing and sort of where it's at in its journey towards building something larger. And I think that's interesting. And if you know that going in, like if you know that going into the ecosystem, at least you know what you're dealing with compared to something else, right? It's not going to be super polished.
It's a radical community chain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like completely community owned and operated, which it makes it like probably in a weird way one of the most decentralized projects in crypto. Like we just passed a prop. Like the core team is fully like under the control of the community. They can elect and remove members if they displease them. The like dev fund, which is our equivalent of a foundation, we don't have a foundation. We're like the only crypto project that doesn't have some like secret thing like the ICF or all in bits, like controlling a very large percentage of the chain. And like we actually have that like just completely under community control, which is like that's what we want. Like you know, I actually wonder how different things would be in Cosmos if we had like similar like decentralization of, you know, core community funds effectively. I mean, it's really great if the core foundation is doing its job, but if they're not, then, you know, it's less great.
Yeah, I know you have conflicting views about that on the ICF, but maybe we won't get into that here. Let's keep it constructive.
keep talking about, you know, like other things. But
yeah, well, I mean, so that's an interesting point, because like I've been thinking a lot about this community governance topic over the last few months, and observing communities and how they've dealt with some of their issues. And it feels to me like there's problems with scaling that, right? When you have a small-ish community of people who are fairly aligned on their values, you can arrive at some form of clean consensus around things. But then when the community starts getting larger and you have different interests coming in, and that will naturally happen as our community gets larger, it gets harder to have smoother and more consensual governance. And like look at democratic society as an example of this at scale. You arrive at a point where there are just so many different opinions and stakeholders. And so do you think that full DAO governance can scale, or do you think that at some point things needs to stratify and in order for things to work?
Oh yeah, I think full DAO governance can scale. I mean, look at how much quicker like Juno is moving than Cosmos Hub. It's because the key thing that's needed is the right tooling for it. And if you have the right tooling, then you can scale. So like, for example, like the sub DAO system is great because the sub DAOs are fully accountable to the larger community, which is important. You don't want to just like hand people like a blank check of like, oh, here's $10 million, like go, do whatever you want with it. And there's no way we can remove you, and there's no way we can get the money back, and there's no way we can, there needs to be checks and balances in the system. I totally get the point that like, and I'd be one of the first people to say like, we shouldn't have to fucking vote on everything all the time. No one has the mental bandwidth for that. But we do need to make sure like that like systems are in place to like keep people accountable. So this is what we try to do with sub DAOs. It makes obviously they use DAO DAO, so you can see everything a sub DAO or a group of people is doing, what they're voting on, how they're spending money. The checks and balances are also in place. So if the community is displeased with a sub DAO for any reason, like they can remove members, they can add new members, they can recall funds, they can put limitations on spending. So for example, we have this new vesting contract, which I'm so excited about. It's about to come out, and it's really going to unlock, I think, a lot of really cool things for not just Juno, but for like a lot of other communities as well. It basically allows for like, let's say you're starting like a marketing sub DAO, and it's like your budget is going to be like $250K for the year, but like we don't want to, like maybe we don't trust you, and there's a couple other people on the sub DAO, so we're going to like limit your ability to spend that all at once. So you're budgeted for $250K for the year, but that unlocks over the whole year. So like the first month you can only spend like 25K or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the next month another 25K unlocks, and on and on and on. And that prevents like sub DAOs from being able to like rug community, and also make sure that they like don't like overspend as well.
Yeah.
So we have and they could always, go back to the community and request, hey, like there's this really big effort, there's this big event we want to sponsor, we need to unlock more funds, and then the community can have a discussion about that. But what's really great is then the sub DAO can go off and be like, oh, we need to pay this event, and we need to pay this poster designer, and we need to pay this journalist, and we need to pay this content creator. They don't need, like the community doesn't need to vote about that. Like I think one of the bad things in Cosmos governance right now is it's like so flat, it's so direct democracy. You have all these people that are like, please sponsor my podcast, or like, help out this like charity effort, or like whatever. It's too much. No one can pay attention to all that stuff. And so it's better to like, you want to divide things up so that people don't have to like, so that like the big decisions the community has like are basically like, are we happy with like the performance of this group that's supposed to do a certain task, or hey, here's this new sub DAO. They want this amount of budget. This is who's on it. This is how they think they're going to provide value to the network. Is that something that's worth doing? And then that group or that team or that council or that sub DAO, choose whatever name you want. They go off and they like go and do the task, and hopefully like do it well and create value for the community. And if they don't do it well, then there's mechanisms for the community to get their funds back, or to kick people out, or to add new people that they feel like better represent them. That's like, I think that's a really nice like kind of balance, and like sort of how we can get DAOs that like kind of scale. But to me it all comes down to like the tooling, and like being able to have things like vesting contracts. Vesting contracts are really useful for like funding projects as well. Like I really don't like this idea, and we learned the hard way as well by doing this, because we just go out and do it. I feel like Cosmos Hub, some of the others that have been a little bit slower might like wind up learning a lot of the same lessons, and like might wind up structuring their sub DAOs or consoles or whatever they call them in the same kind of way that we do. But like, you shouldn't just like, if you make a commitment to like fund a project, there has to be milestones, and then there has to be a community out at some point. You can't just like commit to a project of like, you know, we're going to like fund you like $1 million, you know, with these milestones or whatever, because you know, what's inevitably going to happen is that there's going to be a project that like quote unquote hits the milestones, but the community is like really upset with for some reason. And then who is the arbitrator in that case? These things need to like, in terms of like DAO proposals, we need to be very, very explicit and have as much on chain as possible about the like relationship of that dynamic of like, in the event of there's a dispute, like let's say we're working together and I pay you and we have some milestones, but now we have disagreement about whether or not you actually hit those milestones. Who resolves that? That needs to be like explicitly in the smart contract. And we have to have like explicitly like, you know, like a clause that says like,
whoops, sorry.
You might have a clause like, in the event of a dispute, you know, the Juno community is the final arbiter over, you know, like the decision or whatever. And then that puts the project in the hot seat. They just can't take the money and run. They have to actually fucking deliver, and they should deliver. They're getting these community funds, and they should be accountable. And if they don't want to like sign that clause, like, well, then don't fucking request community funds. Like, I think we can like do a lot to like normalize this stuff. And so we have, you know, we've been working with the Juno growth funds. We got this new vesting contract, and we're going to be using this with like a lot of our projects kind of going forward of like, no, you don't just get a blank check, you know, like there's got to be a clause that like, if the community is upset, I mean, also part of your job receiving funding is to keep the community fucking happy. And if you can't do that, I'm sorry. Like, I hope you get broke. Like,
yeah, there's I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think this vesting contract seems pretty cool and also very useful, right? And needed. And you're right. I think we need to stratify the funding mechanisms a lot more. So doing you know, on-chain proposals in a single community pool that essentially, you know, needs to be vetted by the entire community doesn't work at scale. You know, we had a lot of these conversations around Atom 2.0 and the allocator, and you know, I think specialization is ultimately required once you grow at a scale that is, you know, large, a couple thousand people. Because there are, you know, you can't ask a community of like token holders, hey, what do you think about like this thing or that thing? Most people have no idea what things cost. And so, you know, when you look at, okay, like, hey, I'm like, well, here's a very pertinent example. So I just like a few minutes ago posted a proposal up on the Juno Commonwealth for the Juno community to consider sponsoring Nebula Summit, which is this conference we're organizing in Paris this summer. And you know, we're asking for like a decent sum of money, right? Because, well, we want to make sure that like Juno can be fully present there, that it can be part of the hackathon, that like Cosmwasm is a big part of it and everything. And we put it up there for community feedback. And one of the first things people said to us was like, okay, what's the budget? And so we're okay, well, we'll provide some budget. We'll provide some more information about what the budget is. And so this is useful feedback for us, because okay, well, this is what the community wants to know. Yeah. But I've had this experience before also where, you know, last year we did the same thing where we asked Evmo's community for money, and it, you know, it went really well. They were present there. The community was happy, but a lot of folks were like, this is like, you know, you don't need this much money to organize a conference. Well, I mean, what do you know about organizing a conference in Paris? You know, like, what do you know about, you know, the price of venues or the price of catering and this sort of thing?
Yeah, you know, I think
so that was an interesting experience.
That people just need to like grow a bit of a thicker skin around. I hear a lot of people like bitching about this all the time, like, oh, the community, oh, the community, oh, the community. The community is a hive mind. You can't be offended by like, yeah, there's going to be people that don't understand shit. That's fine. It's your job to like communicate to those people anyway. Like, you're requesting community funds, and like there's some extra legwork that comes with it. But I think it comes like down to like, it creates better results at the end of the day. And you know what? There's also a lot of smart people in the community. So there's the flip side. We have like the dumbest of dumb people but there's also some smart people as well. And so like
There's the
collectively
bell curve. Yeah.
collectively as a hive mind, the community is giving you like a lot of signal, you know? And I think obviously projects requesting funding, they're always like in the mentality of like, my thing is super important and deserves to be funded. And they just need to like engage with the community a lot more. And some people, I'm not gonna name names, they get really frustrated about like, oh, we have to engage with the community or whatever. It's just like, yeah, you do. And if you can't deal with that, just what are you doing?
It's like I don't have an issue with engaging with community. I mean, that's part of the game. I think that I think that at a certain scale, it becomes difficult to achieve anything without layers of abstraction. And the sub DAOs are solving this. Like sub DAOs are actually solving this by giving people responsibility, getting those people to be accountable, but not requiring them to vote on everything. And I think that's important if you just want to get work done, right?
Yeah, you know, the really important thing there is the chain of accountability. It's like, how do you make sure that like you have to like put people's feet to the fire a little bit. Like you have to like make sure that the people on the sub DAOs are like properly incentivized to do a good job. Like, oh fuck, if we do a bad job and we like fund like something like a little too heavily that the community doesn't find value in, that could like mean I get removed from the sub DAO. That could mean I don't get like paid. That could mean I don't like our sub DAO funding gets revoked. That could mean like X, X, and X. And now that whoever's reviewing those events or those like, you know, dev funding or like open source grants or whatever, they're like thinking a lot more aligned with the community. And
it's interesting because like this is the kind of accountability we want with our politicians, right? Like I wish I could
I really do.
So many politicians.
But like I think we are like actually we're going through this process of like recreating like governance systems and institutions from the ground up. And many times we're like kind of reinventing like similar looking things, but that process that we're going through is super important. And I think, and the tools, like, you know, I think that, you know, you could build like a really awesome local government that would function like better than any other local government with like DAO DAO today, basically. And like where things are going to be at in like a year or 2 years from now is like, I think other organizations that are even not even just blockchains are going to be looking at this tooling and be like, and the way we structure ourselves and be like, holy shit, like this is like way more efficient. This is like really great. There's like direct democracy and yet accountability at the same time. I think this is one of the big, you know, in terms of like the vision of Juno, I think that in the interchain, the most effective DAO like takes the cake or gets like, you know, a large market share. How do you build this like self-governing, self-running community? And how do you like get it like as much capital as possible that it can like reinvest and like grow and grow and grow? The interchain is like, you know, like each paradigm of crypto, and I've been through enough, like has like different kind of meta. And we were previously, you could argue we're still in the multi-chain paradigm, but we're heading to this interchain world where block space is cheap as fuck. Like there's just so much block space, but like it's really all about like the applications and the people and like interoperability. And I think in that kind of world, like successful projects are going to look very different. A successful project, for example, will not run on just one blockchain. They're going to run on as many blockchains as they can because it's all about network effects. It's about getting the most users for your protocol. Absolutely.
Well, just to wrap up on that note, if people are interested in looking at this proposal, it's up on Commonwealth. I'll put a link in the show notes, and we're open to the community's feedback on this, and looking for feedback on the proposal. And then on the what are your thoughts on like quadratic voting and this sort of novel voting mechanisms for DAOs? And this is something that
we actually have a ranked choice voting contract that's coming soon, which I think will be really great, really useful. We have multiple choice that's going to be like shipped really, really soon. So like Very, very excited for those kind of use cases. Quadratic voting in particular very much interests me. But there's a big challenge with quadratic voting is it doesn't work in every context. You need to protect against Sybil accounts. So Sybil accounts is like, you know how with blockchain we can have like hundreds and hundreds of accounts, which is great. I think that's a great thing. That kind of fundamentally, breaks something like quadratic voting. For quadratic voting, you kind of need like one person that's like a unique person. You can't, if one person has 100 accounts, like you can really kind of like break and game quadratic systems. The Gitcoin folks have thought like really deeply about this and published a lot of stuff. And they have this product called like Gitcoin Passport that like really attempts to like make sure that like an account that is voting like belongs to like one singular person, and that one singular person cannot vote more than once. And if you can sort of guarantee that through like whatever sort of like identity systems that you want to build, then quadratic voting is like really, really cool. But I'm excited about some other things like ranked choice voting. Like we are looking at using like ranked choice voting or like potentially, multiple choice voting for like election styles. Like, so you could have like an election of, people running for like a particular sub DAO, or people running to replace someone on a particular sub DAO.
I have friends who are really into Urbit. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, it's cool.
So there's a group of people that I hang out with who are really into Urbit and think that Urbit is an effective tool for, a few things. One, displacing Discord as the central place where people chat for DAOs, so that DAOs could actually own their data, because essentially everybody would have their data in their own, Urbit environment. And then the other thing is, because Urbit identities are so sticky and people really get attached to their Urbit names, right? Even though they're pseudonymous effectively, it's harder, or it's more complicated. It's more work to create more identities. So perhaps this could be like a Sybil, like a mechanism against Sybil attacks. But have you given any thought to like Urbit's role as a way to manage identities and DAOs? Like, is this something that you think is?
I mean, it's something that could be like, play along nicely with a bunch of other stuff. I don't know exactly I'm very open-minded to like potential solutions for that. And that could be one. I think it really just depends on like adoption, like how widely adopted Urbit becomes. And it's definitely something we could, integrate at some point if it gets to like the right amount of adoption. But there's other ways to do things, like have decentralized like chat or whatever. So for example, like you could use Matrix. Matrix is like an open source encrypted version of Discord. And like DAOs can like effectively run their own like federated servers, which could be like really appealing for a lot of people. I don't know. There, more and more people are kind of working on this sort of like the Discord problem. And it'll be really exciting to see like what comes up and what people are looking at. A lot of people are also working on the identity problem as well. I mean, so Urbit could be like definitely a potential solution. So
I don't know that much about it. I just have like these two friends who are really, really into it and think it's the future. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about DAOs DAO DAO a little bit more. And like, I wrote this thesis a couple of 2 weeks ago and talked about DAO DAO. And thanks for providing your comments there as well.
Sure.
And one of the use cases I thought was really interesting is leveraging DAO DAO for DAO governed validators. And I think this is such an interesting use case. Can you explain how that works practically speaking, and what part of that stack is decentralized?
So the way a DAO run validator works is you have like a smart contract, like on Juno, for example, and it's running. It's just the normal DAO contract. People can vote to execute any Cosmos message. And that could, be like calling another smart contract. That could be minting an NFT. That could be trading some of the DAO's treasury on Wind, or like LPing some of the DAO's treasury on Wind. Or then the DAO can, vote on any Cosmos message. And so one of the Cosmos messages we support is create validator, or edit validator, or claim validator commission. So we have all the messages, the Cosmos messages that that are used to run a validator, and the DAO is capable of just voting on all those different messages. So we actually have the DAO DAO validator. I think we're at like number 7 in Juno, which is people got pretty excited about it, which is great. It's run entirely by our DAO. So we actually have a whole sub DAO dedicated to the DAO validator, and that sub DAO is in charge of like claiming the commission, sending it back to the DAO treasury, voting on governance proposals is another one. So we have all the tools in the DAO DAO UI to just like manage your validator collectively as a DAO. Now you're probably wondering but who runs the node? So these have always been separate in Cosmos. So there's the concept of the validator, but then there's also the concept of the node operator. And the node operator has its own special public key, which it uses for signing. And so when you run the create validator transaction, you actually include the public key of the node operator. Now, if you're on the same machine, these are the same. You got the same public key for the node operator, and the same public key that's signing the create validator transaction. But in the context of the DAO, obviously as a DAO, we can't, run a node. But we can work with someone else to run a node, or one of the DAO members could run a node. Or you could use something like Horcrux that allows a bunch of validators to come together and each run a node and each have a partial fragment of the key, like a 4 of 7, if you will. So there's a couple different options here, but the basic idea is that the node operator has its own public key that's separate. So for example, with DAO DAO, we have a bunch of the DAO DAO folks, and they're running the validator, which we need anyway for one of the indexers that we've built. So they run the validator, but the DAO calls the create validator transaction, and all the money flows to the DAO and not to the people running the validator's pockets. But they do request a certain budget of hey, I've got this much server costs, so we have a deal with them to cover their server costs at least, and then give 10% on top for the labor. Each DAO needs to kind of figure out that situation. You could have DAO members run it. You could. We've actually talked about a DAO that's launching soon, which is kind of a public benefit DAO, and we were thinking about having a validator to get some income for it, and we were going to have a bunch of existing validators each run a node for this public charity kind of DAO. So they're kind of donating the compute resources of one node, and then we would use Horcrux to allow them to that way. It's not it's not we're just working with one validator. We're actually working with 7 validators, and they each run a node, but that they're all running one node for the DAO validator. I think these are
so they're each signing transactions with Horcrux is allowing each of them to do signing, and so they're distributing the load of that validator. That's interesting. Yeah, and I guess you could also could you use something like Akash to run the nodes?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, totally.
Okay, so you could effectively do a fully decentralized validator.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of exciting things to explore here. But another great thing about the DAO run validators is then it gives a lot more people a say in the direction of the validator. People can vote how the validator will vote, which is which is pretty cool. Imagine a representative democracy where if you cared enough, you could vote on how your senator should vote.
It puts correctly. I mean, ideally, you'd want all the delegators to be voting independently. I mean, this this already kind of exists, only like delegators don't all vote. But if you had some kind of quorum where,
I think a lot of the people that really care are going to vote directly, but if you could also vote in how your validator votes, like that's extra, because one of the problems, and I think we could debate whether or not this is a bad thing, but when validators vote in Cosmos, if the delegators don't vote, the validator votes for them. So there's a lot of people like that, especially on certain chains. Like on Juno, we have like a pretty great voter turnout. Like it's pretty awesome. But there's other chains that are a lot less good on that voter turnout. And so that means that validators are voting with all this extra power. So it does matter. I think, it'll be really exciting to explore these ideas like a lot more in like the coming years. But I think it's really good for the decentralization of networks. And I actually think it's a really great way to bootstrap validators. Like imagine if like, instead of like just going to launch a validator right away and like be like, everybody delegate to us on Juno. Like imagine if you created a DAO first, like a DAO around the interop. And then now you've got like that whole business model. And then you get money in the treasury. Like say you like you just like get the money for like the conferences or whatever, or you get, I don't know how the interop business model works, but you get money in the treasury.
There is no business model.
Yeah, you get
this is me. It's just me doing content, dude. There's no business model.
Right, well, figure out a business model. Start a DAO, start like a journalism DAO or something like that. That sounds cool. And then like, or just like use the DAO to like help fundraise, like getting into the active set. Basically, I think this is like a whole interesting dynamic that we could like potentially see like this year. But it gives you like another tool to like help people get in the active set. So
yeah, that's cool. What's the most interesting stuff on the DAO DAO roadmap?
We got so much great stuff. We have like some real fucking interchain accounts features they're going to be shipping. You've heard of interchain accounts, right? Have you ever actually used interchain accounts?
Have I used interchain accounts?
Wait,
I mean, if I use Quicksilver, I've used Quicksilver, so I've used interchain accounts, I guess. Sorry?
Yeah, all right. So you got liquid staking, that's it. But like, can you have an account on the Cosmos Hub, for example, and just do anything across the interchain?
Well, not yet,
because it sucks. Like the Cosmos Hub is great at like over marketing things and then under delivering. But like we're gonna like actually make really fucking great interchain account experience. So as a DAO, you are going to be able to swap tokens on Osmosis, LP your treasury, and get like rewards. You're going to be able to create NFTs, mint them on Juno, and sell them on Stargaze. You're going to be able to like hold accounts across the interchain and see balances for them and stuff. And so yeah, that's like we really want to live up to the interchain DAO tooling, and we think it's like strategically also very important for making Juno a hub, like the hub of the DAOs. And by being some of the first people to like actually ship like working UX and good UX around this, like I think we can like make a big difference. So I'm pretty excited for interchain account support. We have fundraising tools that are on the way. So what do every group, let's say you're a nonprofit, what do you want to do? We usually have to fundraise somehow. Maybe you have to fundraise to get your validator into the active set, or like, so these are incredibly important for many different types of DAOs and projects. Basically, every group, whether you're like a nonprofit or a club or a startup, at some point you want to do some sort of fundraising, right? Like this is something we do with like entities. So we're building some like really, really awesome, like next level kind of fundraising tools for DAOs. We have a lot better like NFT support on the way. We already have like NFT DAOs. We're going to be like supporting like Stargaze outposts. So you're going to be able to like mint like your NFT for your DAO or whatever, and then like seamlessly list it on like, the Stargaze marketplace if you're looking to sell it. We're going to have like DAO publishing tools, which are, I kind of alluded to, but I'm particularly really excited about given my background. we're gonna have better like kind of fiat supports. We actually have fiat on ramps now, but like we want to get like little payment widgets so that like DAOs can like include a little snippet on their website, and then people can just swipe their credit card and it shows up as USDC in the DAO's balance. We are also working, a really big initiative for us this year is privacy. Privacy is great.
That's
I think
huge.
one of the best things about DAOs is transparency, but it's like our logo. It's like the yin yang. Sometimes you want transparency. Transparency is really good, but sometimes you want privacy, and we want both. So we've been actually working with Risk Zero. Risk Zero is like working on this amazing like zero knowledge like virtual machine. And so we're working with them to like implement private voting, private DAO treasuries, and private DAO membership. So like that
is this a
CosmWasm
VM or is it something different?
Oh, well, it plays great with CosmWasm because CosmWasm is awesome, and CosmWasm is just written in Rust, and Risk Zero is also written in Rust. So, that's great. So in fact, I already have a working smart contract example for verifying a ZK proof in using Risk Zero. So there's going to be a lot.
DAOs would be able to verify proofs.
Yeah, so we'd have smart contracts that would allow for like private voting and private DAO treasuries and private membership. So
okay, yeah, I think the private membership thing is really huge. I mean, I feel like with DAO, the way this probably needs to be designed is in a way where like accountability for like people who are need to be accountable, and like privacy for voters, or I mean, at least that would be like the ideal thing, right? If you think about it from
I think
broader
that
governance perspective,
it'll just be another option when you're creating your DAO of like,
yeah.
Do you want like public or private? Like, do you want like, is this like, obviously for like something like a community fund, you want that stuff to be public. These people are spending community money. We want to see how they're voting. We want to see what they're doing. We want to make sure that they're like doing their jobs correctly so that we can hold them accountable. I think that's also true for like projects that are like, kind of like raising money. It's like, we don't want like a startup, for example, to raise money and then just like, no, they have to be accountable to like, the people that invested. There's a lot of times where you want transparency, but then there's also times where you want privacy. You want people to be able to like imagine you're in a class and you're voting on like how you should rate your professor. You don't want to like rate your professor badly because then he's going to see it. And so you need like kind of actually private voting. So the professor gets the final score, but can't see how everyone in the class voted,
Yeah. I'm really excited about the interchain account stuff. And I think, when you were talking earlier about Juno becoming a hub for DAOs, this is the way that I've been kind of talking to people about it. I see Juno becoming a like Gnosis chain like thing for the Cosmos ecosystem, where it has all of the best DAO tooling, all the best DAOs are there. And then with this interchain accounts integration, I think like it could also become in a way the account abstraction chain, where anytime you're creating an account on any other chain, well, you're actually creating an account on Juno, because that chain has all of the tooling to be able to do really complex stuff across the interchain, like all these things you've been describing. Yeah. Is that the vision for Juno? I mean, is the vision for Juno to become this DAO tooling hub?
I mean, I think DAOs are like a crucial part of the strategy of Juno, because I think that DAOs are how business activity happens. I want investment DAOs on Juno. We're going to have like tools for investment DAOs, like things like the vesting contract. We have a token swap contract. Like all this you can use without having to know any fucking code. It's all right there in the UI. Like, and I think by being like early adopters in this, like, we're probably like the most underrated like chain in the Cosmos right now. Like if you look at in terms of like our metrics, like our daily active users, if you look in terms of like actual development activity, and it's not just DAO DAO, like look at everything Wind is doing. It's like, it's incredible. They're building like interchain DeFi protocols. Like like real interchain DeFi protocols. Like, I think I would just add a little bit more to it, because I don't think that like the goal is to be like just like a Gnosis chain. I think that that's like, I kind of agree with that, and that it's like a really important part of the strategy. But the way I think about it, like the tagline I've been using is like, I want Juno to be the interchain incubator, where we're like, yes, we have all this DAO tooling, but we really want to be like incubating like the best like interchain protocols. Like, it's like, I think people go about launching projects in Cosmos all wrong. They immediately jumped to launching a whole L1, and then they have like basically hardly any like usage. And then they have all this overhead too of like running a whole L1. Like, I think what I've been advising a lot of projects to do, and what a lot of projects on Juno have already done, is like, you launch on a chain like Juno, take advantage of the really like insanely passionate community and like the awesome DAO tooling, which you can use for like fundraising and deploying your smart contracts, and maybe even integrate into your protocol. Take advantage of all that stuff, and then launch your product on Juno, get some product market fit. And then once you get some traction, once you get some actual users, well, then you can like think about like launching your own like L1, and you can secure it with mesh security. So that's another big thing for like the Juno roadmap this year is mesh security. So I think it's going to be a real game changer, and I think it's going to scale a lot better than ICS scales. ICS is like I've already been hearing a lot of complaints about, you know, from validators, like there's only going to be so many ICS chains. There's not going to be thousands. And I think that this is like a big misconception that a lot of the lay people think, is they think that like ICS is going to endlessly scale and there's going to be thousands of consumer chains. And that's just not the case. Validators, every chain that's added, the validators have to run an instance of, and they will get slashed if there's downtime. And so it's going to be important to actually like ship like real like shared security solutions that scale. And I think that's going to be mesh security. At least that's what we've like, you know, and I've been helping like develop that, you know, we have some of our best developers like helping develop that. But to me, like that's more aligned with like the Juno kind of vision of like the home of interchain DAOs, or the interchain incubator, is we want to be able to incubate projects, get them their funding they need, get them to like launch on Juno and get that early like traction. And then we want to be able to like support them and still like have a beneficial economic relationship with them after they launch their own L1, because we don't want them on Juno forever. And I think that this is in the interchain paradigm, what really matters is like that value is accruing to the stakers, that this Juno stakers are getting good ROI for who cares if it's happening on the Juno blockchain? Fuck, if a protocol is like really taking off and doing like thousands of transactions per like, you know, per minute or whatever, I don't want it on the Juno blockchain. It's going to drive up gas fees for everybody else. You know, it's like, at that point, they deserve their own, you know, Cosmos L1. And the great thing about mesh security is allows us to have like an advantageous economic relationship and still like benefit from like, we can effectively like secure each other. And so like the vision is that like we're going to incubate all these protocols, all these amazing like interchain things that are even going to transcend the Cosmos ecosystem as we like typically think about it, of just the Cosmos SDK chains. No, we want to go into Polkadot, and we want to go into Avalanche, and we want to go beyond. Like that's how we get the most valuable protocols. And then the great thing about mesh as well is it works with non-Cosmos SDK chains as well, or it can. And that is a big game changer going forward. And so we'll be able to spawn these protocols and then like forge like mutually beneficial economic relationships with them as they spin off into their own L1s, or they like spread out throughout the interchain.
Yeah, I think that's a really sane vision of product scaling in blockchains. The way I've been thinking about it is, you know, smart contracts are, you know, launching on a smart contract chain is like building your website on WordPress. It's you know, you have very little sovereignty, but you're building an application that's going to work and it's going to allow you to, you know, grow and build a user base. And then you can kind of move up from that. And I don't think app chain is maybe like the next logical step, because I think app chains are going to are going to end up costing quite a bit to secure. Maybe mesh security will offset some of that cost a little bit, but I feel app chains are really, you know, the fangs of crypto, right? Like these are big chains that need vertical integration.
Yeah,
you know, things like DYDX, things like osmosis, and in between, I feel like there's a space for I think rollups make a lot of sense in between there. Depending on the level of sovereignty you need, you might need a settlement rollup or a sovereign rollup, but it's more of a linear growth thing than like you know, these things are in opposition to each other.
You know, I do think that economic security, like one of the things that I really am sort of upset about in this whole like discussion of shared security and interchain security, and there's many aspects to security, like, and economic security is just one aspect. And there's been all this like talk of like, oh, like they talk about it as if it's the only thing, that if you're secured by a high market cap chain that you're secured. And the truth could not be further from reality. First of all, like there's not been a lot of successful like economic attacks against chains. Like a lot of chains don't even have that much liquidity out there. Like let's just say that for sake of example, there's like $100 billion of assets on Juno, and we only have a market cap of 100 million. Well, guess what? Given the current state, most Juno is not listed on exchanges. Like there's like you can't buy enough like Juno to like actually take over the network, because like and then what it is like, okay, that all gets bought up, and now the market cap of the Juno chain has gone up, and it's going to cost more and more to like continue like buying up the chain. What's more concerning to me is actually another risk that's not been addressed, which is validator concentration. Like how many validators has to be compromised in order to halt the chain or take over the chain? Another thing that I think is extremely important that we need to solve as an ecosystem is software security, because there have been, you know, I can't talk about them, but there's like real bugs. And guess what? Just because you're secured by a high market cap chain does fuck all for that. Like it does nothing with when it comes to like software security. So I'm really excited to be launching a security DAO, a security sub DAO finally. And we're like, you know, building some powerful defense and offensive like tools like in-house. And, you know, I think it's going to be like really important. We need to think about security though, like really holistically. It's not like even mesh security. I think mesh security is great, but you're really only talking about economic security. In many ways, I think the main benefit of mesh security is just like forging like mutual economic incentives between chains. You know what I mean? So yes, we can secure each other, but we can also sort of form this like mutually beneficial kind of relationship.
Yeah, that's great. And the security DAO is going to be funding security research, or what's the idea?
Security research, running things like bug bounty programs, things like that. I think with that, we want to also try to get as many of like the best devs as possible. Like, you know, we got Reese, we got myself, we got like a few others, and we're like gonna try to get just honestly like a really good group of people that it's like really focused on Cosmos security. There's just so many different. Don't get me wrong. I think our funds are safe, but like there's a lot of issues. Like oftentimes, like, you know, there's a lot of things that might not result in like theft of funds, but could result in like downtime for a chain for sure. I think that there's a large amount of those kind of issues. I think we need, and I think this is actually something that we need to like dedicate resources to across the Cosmos. I think a lot of us are so focused on like building features and like bringing value to our token and making like great products. You know, we need to like have this like cross, you know, ecosystem, like better collaboration on how do we make this software stack as robust as possible, even to downtime. Okay, it's like downtime is like not that big of a deal if you think about it. Like, great, the chain's down for like, you know, a day or 8 hours or whatever it is, but that's when we're talking about like running like actual fucking economies, like actual financial markets and stuff, like that's absolutely huge. And so we like, if you think about like, especially as we go into like, you know, maybe a bull market again, or at least get away from like the worst of the bear market, like if you think about the amount of dollars that is like of economic activity that is lost because of downtime, it's like we need to do everything as possible to prevent those kinds of incidences in the future. And yeah, so as important as economic security is, and it is important, and I think there are some like good things about the other ICS design. Not that many, but there's a few. Like we really do need to be taking like a more holistic look at security as an industry, and yeah, that's that rant.
Cool. Well, looking forward to seeing the Security DAO and the research that comes out of that. So what is the two questions? Who do you think I should have on next? Who would you love to see getting more airtime?
You should get Shane.
And then I'll ask you a second. I had Shane on a couple of weeks ago. It was super. Okay. It was a great conversation. Yeah.
All right.
Second best.
You should get Zeke from DAO DAO. I don't know if you want to have like 2 DAO DAO people on in a row, but you know, he's great.
Yeah, no. So he's been suggested to me as well, and I was actually thinking of doing like another episode that's about DAO DAO, but a little bit more technical, like getting into the contracts and actually
be like a perfect person to do it, because like so
cool. And
what's the contracts and stuff, and he's really a lot of the like the giga brains behind it, but it's pretty cool.
Okay, well, I'll try to get him on. And before we wrap up, like, what is the thing that people can do to contribute to Juno? But more importantly, what are some areas that are severely lacking in terms of resources, in terms of people building, where there's like some low-hanging fruit that people can get into and start contributing in meaningful ways?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we actually have like a really strong like development community in Juno, like which is great. Other chains, I'm not going to name names, they have to like do like a huge marketing budget. I've literally seen ads in their feed and they get like zero engagement. They're like, please, Cosmwasm devs, we need you so much. Like, we're just a big VC chain and we've got developer incentives. Oh, we also have developer incentives too. The next version of Juno, like half the transaction fees can go to like smart contract developers, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, so we're actually doing really great on developers, and I have actually a fundamental kind of almost contrarian belief is that it's all quality over quantity. Like give me 5 of the best like Cosmwasm devs. Give me Zeke, give me Noah, give me like Ethan Fry and like the Winds team, and like that's all you need to like really change the world and make like the next paradigm. Like if you have like 100 like mediocre Cosmwasm devs, like good luck with that. I'll take 5 of the best people. Like those are going to make like the game-changing interchain protocols. In terms of what we need though, like, I think that Juno as a decentralized community really needs a lot more help on like kind of just marketing and storytelling, and like maybe it comes down to like content creators of like, we have a communication sub DAO, but there's just so much work to do on like sort of the marketing and storytelling side of like, we actually have like some really great numbers in terms of like daily active users, but like who's like spinning that into a narrative? Like how are we like working with journalists and like telling our story? Like what, like unfortunately, like all the press that we've gotten is like for like mildly negative events. And then we did all these actions to like fix those things, but like, we need to like get people that are like kind of more focused on like those kind of aspects. And that's not me yet, I'm not like a marketer or anything like that, but that'd be like, kind of something that I would look for is just like, I would encourage people like come engage with the community. Like there's Discord, there's Telegram. There's a really great like Juno community that happens over Twitter Spaces and on Twitter. Follow me.
There's a few of those.
Retweet a lot of those people. And like, yeah, get involved in the community via like Twitter Spaces. And then I think, after you've been hanging out for a while and feel how things work, like there's a lot of work, I think, just on that whole like kind of media side of like what kind of content are we making? How are we telling like the Juno story and the Juno narrative? Because I think it's gotten lost in the context of like a lot of the other like heavy marketing that's like kind of going out. That's why like the Juno is dead joke is kind of a joke. Is like we're actually, you know, as like this week, if you look over the past 7 days, we're the most active, most used Cosmos chain, and yet like everyone is out like
there's so much fud.
there's so much fun.
Yeah, I need to connect you guys with Story Guild. They're like a PR DAO, and they have like actual PR experts in it, and you know they work for
Yeah,
like a bunch of chains.
I think that that's actually something that's like really needed is like a PR kind of sub DAO on Juno. And like
Yeah.
I'm not the person to lead that. I've never done PR or anything like that, but like, you know, those kind of aspects are really important. And I think it's the biggest thing we're lacking at the moment of like we've made a lot of stride in terms of like investment sub DAOs. So like the Juno Growth Fund, I think is doing a really good, like very thorough job of like reviewing projects and investing in them. And there's a lot of really great checks and balances that I think could inspire like other projects in the ecosystem. I actually wish that Prop 95 like borrowed a little bit more heavily from the Juno Growth Fund. But like we, you know, and Core One is now a sub DAO, which is I'm so fucking excited for. Like that's amazing. We have you know all our like software development, but I think that, and we do have the communications DAO, but the communications DAO is different from like, you know, there's so many different aspects to like communications and marketing. You know, there's PR, there's content production. Oh, there is one more thing that if you're listening, we really need help with. Documentation is a huge challenge. And I've actually been talking with some folks from Terra, and I've been talking with some folks from like Osmosis. We need to do a better job of Cosmosm documentation because right now it's all like very like fragmented. And the reason this is a problem is because like it's pretty technical, right? And the most technical people that are most capable to work on the documentation, guess what? They're too busy like actually like building the protocols, you know, like because like documentation does not pay as well as like building like a really lucrative like interchain DeFi protocol. You know, it's like so we're kind of in this catch-22 with Cosmosm documentation. I would say actually Terra has like the best Cosmosm documentation at the moment, but like it still has like a huge amount of room to improve. And then I think one of the problems, which I really hope we can get over as an ecosystem, is like everyone's kind of reinventing the wheel and everyone has their own silo for documentation and it's all low quality. And I really want to move past this. Like, can we all just collaborate on like one canonical Cosmosm documentation resources, like, and all just contribute like resources toward it so that we can make it like really awesome. But if you're listening, and we really do need people to like help kind of spearhead that effort. And it's also a great way, if like you're a dev, it's a great way to actually learn Cosmosm, is to like just go through and like be forced to explain it to other people. And I guarantee by the time you're done with that, you're going to have a really good understanding of it. And you're going to be able to, you know, write some very valuable smart contracts, and everyone's going to love you for like having helped like solve the documentation crisis.
Well, that's great. I think documentation is like really one thing that a lot of teams don't spend enough time on, and something I certainly tell a lot of teams I advise is like spend time writing docs early.
I will say that it's like oftentimes not as valuable as like people want. Like I have a contrarian view. Again, like to me, it's all about getting like, you know, the 5 best devs or the 10 best devs, because like they don't need the documentation. We just read the code. Like
but if you want like, you know, the next wave of people to get on and start using it, like you need good documentation for that.
Yeah, documentation's good. We really need help, and I'm very, very focused at the moment on. But you know, the great thing about Juno is it's not just like, it's not top down. Like I actually don't run it. It runs itself. It's great. So I think those are the biggest areas of opportunity, like marketing and storytelling. and just content, and then just documentation is like, those
Awesome.
are like the biggest needs of Juno. So if you're listening, or maybe you can help us out, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I can try to make some intros and connect you to some people who might be able to help there. Yeah, there's so many more things that I wish we could talk about. Like, I've only covered about half of what I had in my list of topics here.
I
We'll
only
have
covered
to.
like fraction of the DAO DAO roadmap, and we didn't even talk about the Juno V12
we'll
release.
do.
What we're
I'll
planning on
do
for the
another deep dive.
release. Oh my gosh, the next Juno release, I'm gonna just tease it. We're gonna like, get down to like much faster block times. So like like Evmo style like block time, so like 2 to 3 seconds. This is very possible. That's gonna be like, I think that's perfect. We're gonna like also, this is the last thing, but we're also gonna be working on improving the Nakamoto coefficient with real economic incentive. Like, because I think
That's huge.
Cosmos chains could be a
That's
lot
huge.
more decentralized, and like everyone's
Yeah.
talking about security, economic security. I'm worried about validator concentrations, because if you only have to get 6 validators to collude to halt the chain, or if they get regulated against because they all have like, they all live in the same jurisdiction, like that's a huge amount of like existential risk. And so we are going to be working to make it so that if you delegate to the number 1 validator in the set versus the last validator in the set, you make slightly more if you delegate to the last validator, but you're also taking on slightly more risk. So we need to like incentivize people to take on that extra risk to decentralize the chain.
That's massive, and it's so needed.
We just happen to be the craziest, people out there that are actually going to do this before, other communities do.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This has been really fascinating. I really enjoyed this conversation. Learned a lot, and yeah, looking forward to doing more Juno and DAO DAO content, because I've been kind of going into this DAO DAO rabbit hole, and also Cosmwasm, and I feel like there's just like so many strings to pull on, and so we'll definitely do more of that here on the podcast. And hopefully, I hope to see you at the conference and at the hackathon. And we'd love to have a Juno presence there. Great, Jake. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks.
Cheers.
Peace.